This was the time where it was good to be a young director. Every producer was looking for a young director at that time. It was the start of what was called the new wave. I made a movie called The Smile, which is a documentary. It was selected for the Cannes Film Festival. And that, well, we won the Palme d'Or. After the success, I was offered several projects by top producers of the time. Romain Pinès, an old Russian producer that bought several properties. One of them, the title of the book is Les Dimanches de Ville d'Avray. He sent it, among other directors, to Clouzot, Henri-Georges Clouzot, who, after reading it, said, no, I don't think it's a good subject. And he told these friends of his, he was also a friend of mine, the film editor, to give it to me to read. I had the same reaction than Clouzot. It was a gangster story. I didn't really like detective stories, but I told him, no, I'm sorry, it's not for me. But I mentioned a couple of characters in the book, and I said, what a pity that he needed all that stuff about with the gangsters and all and the prostitutes and all that, because the meeting of the little girl with this man who suffer from amnesia, that's very interesting, and it could have been. And the producer told me, well, why don't you write that? The book was written by a French writer. His name is Bernard Echasserio. We met because when the producer told me, you know, why don't you write that? I wanted to tell him what I was going to do. So I started writing that script with a friend of mine, Antoine Tudal. In the book, the man was a gangster that had fallen from the roof of a bank during a holdup, and he survived but suffered from amnesia. And in one of my journeys to the east, I had met a pilot from the French Navy. He quit the Air Force, but he thought he had killed a little girl in an attack in a village in Vietnam. He was like a Conrad hero, you know, Conrad the writer, totally disoriented. His life has been put in shambles after this thing. This is not a thing you can forget. And when I had to write right away, the idea came up to me. It's not something that I invented, the pilot, but it's based on this man's odyssey. I didn't see any French actor looking like what I had in mind. As a matter of fact, I saw Steve McQueen at first, but Steve McQueen was not available. Probably he was not. He was also out of reach financially for us. But it was the type of character, sort of an unusual look, but still a lot of charm. And it's Romain, the producer, who one day brought me an English magazine called Sight and Sound. There was a photograph of Hardy in a movie that he had done with Joe Losey. And he says, doesn't he look like Steve McQueen? And I thought, well, maybe not too much, but yes, I like the way he looks. So he called Hardy in Germany, called his agent. Hardy came to Paris, and we met for dinner with Romain Pinès. I started telling Hardy about the story. He listened, and I could feel that he was getting deep into him. And we got along so well that at 2 o'clock in the morning, we were still there. That was it. Hardy and I agreed. We said, we're going to do it together. Patricia Gozzi, the little girl, I had seen her when she had appeared in a couple of movies, but, you know, tiny little part of child. And I remembered seeing her eyes, her very full of life and deep eyes, in a movie by Jean-Pierre Melville called Léon Morin Prêtre. She came among, I don't know, 30, 40 others I thought I had in order to find the right little girl. I knew I wanted a very special personality, you know. Then, of course, I organized a meeting with Hardy. They got along very well, and from then on, everything ran so smoothly and magnificently.
Mais où il est, mon père? On va aller le retrouver?
Oui, celui qui m'envoie.
Pas plus tard que 7 heures, hein? Sinon, plus de sortie. C'est le règlement.
One of my big questions before we start, I was wondering how to bring on the same line, on the same level, a very experienced and good actor like Hardy and a spontaneous young girl. Strangely enough, it's not in the more dramatic scenes that it had to be rehearsed several times. But the scenes, the very simple things like playing games, and that's where Hardy was doing his best to be on the same level that the little girl. But kids are so spontaneous, you know, that somehow you have to forget all the things you know when you're an actor to be just as spontaneous. I think Patricia considered Hardy as another kid. And helped him, as a matter of fact, in those two characters. One is an adult, the other one is a child. But the adulthood part is in the little girl. She's the one that's on top of the situation. She's the one who said, you are going to come back.
Vous ne m'abandonnerez pas. Jure-le sur ma tête.
Comment?
Eh bien, tu mets ta main sur ma tête, tu te dis je jure, et si tu mens, je meurs.
Je le jure.
Patricia really became that little girl. And interestingly enough, I had written some of the dialogues in a child way. And I remember once reading the script together, Patricia said, but I don't talk like that, you know. So we adjusted. She talks like a grown-up, you know, and so that's why it was funny for me when some people at times told me, but the little girl talks too much like a grown-up. She wrote her own part like that. She put it in her own form.
Ma grand-mère a un couteau très beau, avec un manche en ivoire. Et tu sais ce qu'ils font les sorciers en Afrique avec un couteau pareil? Ils le plantent dans un arbre et ils entendent parler les esprits. Tu te rends compte?
When she was not in front of the camera, she was a kid playing with everyone. And since she has a great sense of humor, she's a happy little person. Exactly like in the story, as far as Hardy is concerned. They liked each other the way this little girl likes this man. I think there was no, after I said cut, and they say, okay, guys, that's a wrap. Life continued just like the film, you know, for all of us. In my mind, there is no question. It's a very pure, beautiful relationship. No open interpretation. I even pushed that idea of it's something so pure that it is extremely fragile. There is a sequence in which she asks him for his age and she counts on her finger. Oh, when you'll be 31, I'll be 13, and so on. And when I'll be 18, I'll marry you. But it is said with child innocence.
Pierre, quel âge as-tu?
Sans doute 30 ans.
30 ans? Moi j'en ai 12, enfin, presque. Alors, 12, 30, 13, 31, 14, 32, 15, 33, 16, 17... Tu as 36 ans quand j'en aurai 18. Je suis pas tellement vieux, 36. Écoute, on se mariera quand j'aurai 18 ans, tu voudras? Moi j'aimerais bien. Je suis capable de faire la cuisine, tu sais. Et le ménage aussi.
This little girl and this man, with that pure love that unites them, were so different from people that. So when you're so different, people start being suspicious. Why are they? And when they're suspicious, they don't hesitate to judge. And when they judge, usually they judge badly. And so they were doomed. For me, that was the tragedy of it, by their singularity, by the fact that they were so pure that the real life was not for them. There are lots of time where the image is not a direct image.
Et du ballon captif.
Oh non, tais-toi 5 minutes, veux-tu?
Vous avez tort, elle est crevante.
It comes either through a reflection, like in the water, or through glass prisms
Pierre, regarde.
that shatters the real world, the reality. When I wrote the shooting script, it was there.
Ce n'est pas par hasard que nous avons choisi le dimanche pour ce rendez-vous avec tous ceux.
One of the Sundays, you hear in the sound voices talking. Then you hear that it comes from radio, probably.
Ça aurait été du joli.
Ce sera tout d'abord le disco ball.
En tout cas, il faudra t'arranger.
And still you don't know where it comes from. So I don't think it's bad that at sometimes people question themselves. You know, all of a sudden, it's like shaking them a little bit if they were going to fall asleep, saying, hey, wake up.
Pourquoi elle a demandé mon adresse?
Ben tiens, c'est
Allô,
normal.
monsieur Gavel?
Puisqu'elle croit que c'est toi, mon père.
Bonjour monsieur, ici Georges Laurier, la RTF. Qui vous appelle?
It is used there in order to create that sort of loneliness of the two characters, you know. They are in their own little world, but yet the real world is still here.
Attendez-moi.
I heard the music when I wrote the shooting script. It was even written in the script that at this stage I want a cello. And again, I owe that to my agent. She introduced Maurice to me. We got along perfectly right away. And I told Maurice my ideas about the music. I said, I don't want a music that can be heard. I don't want a music that can be remembered. I just want the music as an expression of just to help underline some psychological moments. Let us think of it as a silent movie, and I would like you to use a cello, Japanese drum, and a Japanese flute. It's a harmonious breathing. You feel it comes from deep inside the musician. Maurice was getting along very well with his idea, and I told him also there will be in the beginning music that I have recorded in Sikkim. That's the one that for me is the expression of the Far East of Asia, and it is on the credits. And then we are going to hear it again because the sculptor, who is the only one in film that really understands what is going on between Hardy and the little girl, because he's an artist, because he's a sensitive man, so he is listening to that record at the time also, because it connects them with trees, with the notion of vertigo.
Maintenant, c'est la fin de la cérémonie. Ils ont goûté l'univers. C'est au Tibet. Hé, tu sens les forces?
In the Christmas scene, when Pierre, you know, he has stolen everything he could to make it a fancy Christmas party. And in her case, she also wanted to make him a gift, and she gave herself.
Déplie-la maintenant.
It's an intense moment.
C'est belle.
There is a sort of a premonition of what's going to happen. And when Hardy breaks the glass, he cut himself. And you see blood coming. And no makeup, nothing. It was his real blood. And before each take, people are going to think I'm sadistic. I would take a pin and boom, make the blood.
Pauvre Pierre. Tu sais, dans ces cas-là, faut que ça saigne un peu.
And I realized that some people can see evocation of sexual exchanges and everything. Really, maybe it's there, but it was absolutely not in my mind, because this comes to be that all of a sudden, blood comes out of Hardy, and she's doing sick, and she says, I'm going to know all your thoughts now. And it was that sort of communion.
Cybele, c'est ton nom. C'est ton vrai nom. Oh, c'est beau. C'est comme si belle.
C'est mon nom. C'est moi.
They were happy, both of them, but sure, death is there. In the last scene, it would have been easy to show Hardy with a happy grin on his face and coming toward the little girl that he is going to wake up with the present. And he does that tremendous, very dangerous thing for him who has vertigo, to go and get the cock. By doing that, he really gives her the impossible. He gives her the proof of something that's more than love. But in the same time, he realizes that he is up there, very high, and he does not feel dizzy at all.
Le vertige. Je n'ai plus le vertige.
It's a man that has recovered himself entirely. It's a very happy, strong, new person that goes there in order to wake up the little girl, says, listen, here's the moon. But I thought this is something I cannot show in a pedestrian way by just showing it. That's why I had the idea of going back into the room into which Nicole and her friend are waiting for the news, and all of a sudden the phone rings, and dramatically we do understand that. And then there is a sort of clash in the time for telling the story.
Allô? Oui, c'est moi. Ah, ils sont trouvés. Comment? Vous l'avez dit?
And her scream become the little girl's scream. They share their drama. They've never met, but they are affected, both of them, by the drama that's happening. It took time before we were ready for that scene. The film was going on, the weeks were passing. I knew it was going to be difficult for her, because not only does she have to scream, but she has to cry. And these were not false tears. So I would say, okay, tomorrow we are going to do the scene. Oh, she said, no, not yet. She was afraid of it. During last week, I knew finally we'll have to do it. And she was, the entire crew was her family. When she was not in front of the camera, she would play with the grapes. She was there, free like a bird. And of course, when I said silence, usually there was total silence. So she was playing, and I said silence, and I hear her laughing. I said silence, and I saw her freeze like that. And I told Henri, get ready for that scene. We're going to do it now. But she was sitting on my knees, her forehead against mine, like that. And I would think very deep and concentrate for her, and she would concentrate too. And at that time, we did that again. I said, we're going to do that scene now. It's the first time I was mad at her. I knew she was shaken by it, and they were preparing the scene. I said, go fast, go fast, go fast. Then Henri touched my shoulder, didn't say a word, touched my shoulder. Henri Decade, director of photography, which meant we could do it. And she whispered to me, now.
J'ai plus de nom. J'ai plus de nom. Je suis plus personne. Rien.
I knew that we had the thing that I wanted. I took Patricia to the restaurant of the studio. We had a hot chocolate. I called her mother and I said, that's it for the day. Because that's it. I mean, we couldn't go do another thing after such an intense moment. When the film was over, after it met its public, a large majority of the critics received the film the way I thought of it, the way I did it. I remember a meeting with 6 or 7 psychiatrists, men and women, 2 schools, Jungians and Freudians. And some of them said, of course he was cured. The symbol is that he didn't feel dizzy anymore, that he was not under that terrible notion of vertigo and so on. And the little girl was safe. And some others had the same interpretation than the cops in the movie, saying, it was just a matter of time. We saw him approach the little girl with the knife, but that knife was also an innocent tool for them to communicate with the forces of the tree and so on. So it's a symbol that could be taken innocently or, on the contrary, negatively. But it's taught me something. Every artist, you're aware of what you're catching in your camera, what you are putting on screen. You know that this is what the meaning of that scene and so on. And then you see the rushes and you discover much more than what you were aware to have put. And when you see it with the public, it's even more. Then all of it, the real music of a movie is the respiration of the audience. Maybe a movie comes really alive with the heartbeat of the public. I realized that there was a symbolic reading of the movie, that there are lots of symbols, and of course, those psychiatrists stressed them, underlined them. And there was nothing I could say. I would say, hey, yes, you're right. This is, I discovered lots of, and this happens all the time. I don't have a huge list of movies behind me. My career has been up and down, but I must say that it remains probably my warmest souvenir, my warmest memories of a filming, and it was not easy to do, I was really on a cloud. I was not, it was unreal, and I took it for reality. I don't really know why I had such rejection, yes, from the Cahiers du Cinéma guys. We all knew each other because we were the same generation. But there were, if I may say, 2 schools. The young directors having graduated from IDEC, and the others having graduated from film reviews, from being film critics that wanted to make their own movies. And creating a certain style that lots of people liked at the time, making movies on small budget, very fast, which gave them a certain spontaneity that maybe the other side, the ones knowing all the techniques and having studied lots of film directors, maybe we had more respect for the tool than they had. So that might be one of the reasons. But there's another one, which is Sundays and Cybele was made the same year than Jules and Jim. They were in competition for Venice Festival. Who won the film? Cybele ou Les Dimanches de Ville d'Avray, my picture. Then come the time for the selection for the Oscar. And the one that's chosen to represent France to the Oscars is my film. So it was already quite bad. On top of it, I get the Oscar. Hardy told me, they hate your guts. So I put it, they didn't like very much. Whatever can be the interpretation, the truth is that indeed a certain fringe of the French review critics didn't like me at all. at all. I shrugged my shoulders, I said, well, let them do. And I didn't realize that year after year, they could have a very negative influence on my projects, because some great projects I had finally didn't take off. And there was probably some reasons, some of them probably within me, but some others coming from dark clouds put upon my head at some times. There are a few movies that I would have loved to do that I couldn't do. And I can consider that my career is mostly made of movies I've not made. Movies that I've dreamt, that I've written, that are there. But you know, I don't consider myself as being a has-been. Something may happen, because some very interesting little miracles have happened in my lifetime. May happen that someday somebody think, well, why not trying to do a movie with Serge Bourguignon?